We begin with the neighborhood where calls for restoration of democracy are in fact growing in Bangladesh. Three associate bodies of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party, or the BNP, are in fact gearing up to hold a massive rally at 2 p.m. local time. The BNP is demanding early election. For more on this story, my colleague Saurabh joins me. Saurabh, if you can hear to me, how's the government responding to the civil unrest and the demands of these various political groups? Also, what are some primary reasons behind the delay in setting a definitive election date by the interim government headed by Mohammed Yunus, of course? Saurabh.
Well, it's the lack of perhaps a proper reason that explains the delay in laying out a roadmap for elections that's led to a situation where there are protests now taking place. Now, where are the protests taking place? They are taking place in Dhaka's Neapolitan area, which is, of course, the office of the BNP. That's the area where the BNP office is situated. And what we know is that this rally, this protest today that's taking place, and there are massive crowds that have gathered already in the area. These protests are taking place and these are organized by the affiliates of the Bangladesh Nationalist Party. Now, the Bangladesh Nationalist Party is one party that has said that elections should be held by the end of this year, which is December this year. And the army also has echoed the same demand. But obviously, Mohammed Yunus, as his critics argue or critics accuse him, is delaying elections, perhaps making a bid to stay on in power. And that's something that perhaps is leading to a situation where political parties are now beginning to feel that there needs to be more concrete steps taken towards elections, which was the primary mandate for the interim government, of course, when it came to power. Now, obviously, Mohammed Yunus is away on a 4-day official trip to Japan as these protests take place, but the protests are taking place in Bangladesh. Not just today's protests by the BNP affiliates, but also protests that have been taking place organized by government employees who are protesting an ordinance that allows the government to sack government employees for misconduct without lengthy process. And that, they say, is taking away the sort of protection from arbitrary dismissals. So obviously these protests are taking place, but today's protest is massive, political, and the demand is quite clear that the BNP, of course, wants elections by the end of this year, which is December this year, something that the Yunus-led interim government has dilly-dallied on and has been wishy-washy on a date.
Well, in fact, thank you for getting us the latest there, Saurabh. And of course, many around the world are wondering when, in fact, will Bangladesh's interim government hold the promised elections. Now, moving on, SpaceX launched Starship on its 9th test flight. It was a crucial test mission after 2 previous failures. The flight started smoothly, but Starship encountered some issues in orbit. The first stage Super Heavy booster exploded shortly before it was expected to splash down, and fuel leaks on the upper stage, in fact, vehicle caused it to spin uncontrollably before its planned re-entry through Earth's atmosphere. The White House has reportedly moved to cancel remaining federal contracts to Harvard University amid an escalating battle with American universities. Now, Harvard has already sued the Trump administration over halted funding and also a ban on, in fact, enrolling international students. As experts highlight, meanwhile, by targeting institutions, cancelling grants and firing government researchers, Trump is impairing the ability to solve problems, prevent diseases, design policy, inform the public, and also make technological advancements. Here's a very special report.
The attack on Harvard and its international students is part of a deeper effort to defund and dismantle the academic world.
Trump has begun a dangerous march to roll back civil rights in this country. If there is anything to learn from this Jewish history, it's that when we push people out of our schools because of their identity, it's a symptom of a morally bankrupt politics.
But Donald Trump is attacking these freedoms because they get in the way of his authoritarian takeover. This is what authoritarians do.
By framing Harvard as a bastion of Marxist maniacs and liberal bias, would you argue that the Trump administration is now using the global visibility of elite academia to actually signal a new ideological litmus test for US institutions?
Thanks as always for having me. Yeah, I think what's clearly happening here is it's an ideological battle between Trump and those who oppose him. And, you know, anybody who knows Harvard in and out knows that Harvard is hardly a Marxist far left institution. I mean, this is one of the richest organizations in the world. It's an organization that has produced any number of billionaire capitalists. I mean, it doesn't even pass the smell test. What it really is a front for attacking anybody who doesn't agree with Trump's particular ideology. That's the ideological role and war that's going on here. I mean, as I think the last clip you showed said, it's part of the authoritarian project. Trump is trying to strangle off institutions that won't narrowly go along with his line.
Harvard's president has called the curbs on international student enrollment devastating, as you are also highlighting. But Daniel, from a diplomatic standpoint, does this not then send a contradictory message to countries that invest heavily in sending students to the US, as you are pointing out?
I think it does. It sends a message that the United States is now less open and less welcome to international students than it was before. And look, you can say it's just one university, it's just Harvard, but they're picking arguably the most famous and prominent university in the United States. So there's no way that's not going to send a chilling message. And I think that also is bad for American power in its own way, right? It's a form of American soft power, of American outreach. As you were saying, diplomacy, it's really a key word here. The United States can reach out not just to other countries' governments, but to other countries' societies by saying, look, we want you here. We want to give you an opportunity to study with us, to come into the country, have that be a pathway for you. And you're shutting that door out. You're shutting that diplomatic messaging down.
Right, Daniel, as always, thank you so much for joining us with your views. We will, of course, revert to you for regular updates.
Well, staying with the US, where the COVID vaccine will no longer be recommended for healthy children or healthy pregnant women, Health Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. said on Tuesday. Now, the decision was a significant departure from the government's previous approach of recommending annual shots for everyone 6 months and older. Meanwhile, some public health experts have criticized the decision, pointing out that the risk of severe diseases and even hospitalization among infants was comparable to that among adults 65 and older. Others condemned the decision to stop recommending the shots for pregnant women who are at high risk, in fact, of severe illness and complications from COVID. The US State Department is dismissing concerns about deliveries of humanitarian assistance into Gaza by a US-backed private initiative that bypasses the UN and establishes aid organizations. Department spokeswoman Tammy Bruce told reporters, in fact, in Washington on Tuesday, that such concerns were unfounded and that the most important priority is, in fact, getting aid into Gaza, the besieged enclave, no matter who's delivering it. She also blamed Hamas for trying to stop convoys organized by the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation from getting to distribution centers. Here's more.
The fact of the matter is Hamas has been opposed to this dynamic. They have attempted to stop the aid movement through Gaza to these distribution centers. They have failed, but they certainly tried. The bottom line is, the real story here is that the aid is moving through, and in that kind of an environment, it's not surprising that there might be a few issues involved, but the good news is that those seeking to get aid to the people of Gaza, which is not Hamas, have succeeded.
Chaos erupted on the second day of aid operations by a new US-backed group in Gaza as desperate Palestinians overwhelmed a center distributing food on Tuesday, breaking through fences. Israel said nearby troops fired warning shots. Meanwhile, an AP journalist heard Israeli tank and gunfire and also saw a military helicopter firing flares. The Israeli military, meanwhile, has said its troops fired the warning shots in the area outside the center and that control over the situation was established. Meanwhile, at least 3 injured Palestinians were seen by the Associated Press being brought from the scene, one of them even bleeding from his leg. Listen in.
احنا اشتهينا السكر، اشتهينا السيرج. هاي جابوا لنا سكر، جابوا لنا سيرج. وهي جابوا لنا طحين. وهي طحين. اولادنا كانوا مشتهين اللقمه، اكلنا عدس، اكلنا معكرونه. والتجار بيعونا كل حاجات غالية.
EU countries have formally approved a new €150 billion loan program to help rearm in the face of Russia and worries over US reliability. Now, this is according to the Polish presidency of the bloc. The safe borrowing scheme, backed by the EU's central budget, was proposed by Brussels in March, and the bloc rushes to boost its defences. The King Charles III was given a heartfelt standing ovation in Canada's Parliament in Ottawa after a historic speech in support, in fact, of the country staying strong and free. My colleague Maha Siddiqui, meanwhile, unpacks the latest from Vancouver.
Many Canadians are feeling anxious and worried about the drastically changing world around them. Today, Canada faces another critical moment. Democracy, pluralism, the rule of law, self-determination, and freedom are values which Canadians hold dear, and ones which the government is determined to protect.
King Charles III said that true north was indeed strong and free. And that's the sentiment or the message that King Charles III, as the head of state of Canada, wanted to convey from the Canadian Parliament to Canada's neighbour down south, the United States. As the threat from the Trump administration on Canada over annexation looms large, Mark Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, and his Liberal government had invited King Charles to make this address and open the Parliament. The last time that the Parliament was opened by the monarch and the speech from the throne was delivered by the monarch themselves was in 1977 by Queen Elizabeth. King Charles III referred to the first speech that was made by Queen Elizabeth in 1957 in the Canadian Parliament at a time when the memories of World War II were still fresh and there was an onset of the Cold War, a period of uncertainty, in some ways drawing parallels to the geopolitical uncertainties at this juncture, and how Canada needs to remain free, pluralistic, protect its democracy, as well as the rule of law. He said that Mark Carney's government is committed to all these aspects. He also spoke about the trade war and said that US and Canada were negotiating an economic and security agreement while Canada was opening up its access and trade opportunities with other partners as well. He also spoke about how Canada will make an effort to break the interprovincial barriers and make it a one economy rather than 13 separate economies, which has been much criticized by experts as well as the people, considering that much of it and much of these policies have led to Canada's dependence on trade on the United States.
UK police say 50 people have been treated in hospitals after a car rammed into a crowd of Liverpool football fans celebrating their team's English Premier League championship, and 11 remain in hospital. Meanwhile, police are continuing to question the suspected driver of a car that ploughed into a crowd during Liverpool's Premier League victory parade on Monday. Assistant Chief Constable Jenny Sims of the Merseyside Police said the patients were all stable. Listen in.
Following the incident yesterday, I can confirm on behalf of the National Health Service that we are aware of 50 people who were treated at hospital for ongoing treatment. Of those, 11 remain in hospital for ongoing treatment. They are all in a stable condition, and I am pleased to say that they appear to be recovering well. I want to take the opportunity to pay tribute to the brave members of the emergency services who were on the scene of yesterday's incident within a matter of seconds. Following such a shocking incident, they immediately ran towards an extremely uncertain and potentially dangerous situation in an effort to protect members of the public and fellow emergency responders from harm.
Meanwhile, car ramming survivor Jack Trotter said he was clipped by the vehicle which injured his back and legs and also resulted in the use of crutches. Listen in.
I was taking videos of just random Liverpool fans. So I was, just having a ball and singing away. And then I didn't know anything at all was happening until Abby had started screaming my name, Jack. And then I sort of put my phone down and looked up. And then what happened was the car just started ramming through people. He had hit me, and then when he had hit my legs, I just basically sort of span around. So I had just about dodged the middle of the bonnet, and then he clipped my legs with sort of the side of his bonnet.
News from the neighborhood now, where Pakistan's Islamabad has in fact banned child marriage, offering hope that the practice could eventually be outlawed across the Islamic Republic. The bill faced fierce opposition in Parliament, with some religious leaders criticizing it even. Still, Pakistan is among the 10 countries with the highest number of child marriages. Climate-fueled flooding has led to a further surge of monsoon brides, as they are called. Now this as poverty-stricken families in villages marry off their young daughters for money. And the European Commission expressed serious concerns over a Hungarian law that would allow bans on public events by the LGBTQ+ communities as pressure mounts on the country's populist government over democratic backsliding. Speaking in Brussels on Tuesday, the EU Commissioner for Democracy, Justice and Rule of Law, Michael McCroth, said that if adopted, the proposed legislation would constitute a serious breach of the EU principle and EU law. He also added that the Commission would not hesitate to use the tools at its disposal to ensure the EU law is safeguarded. Here's more.
In particular, we do have serious concerns about the draft law on transparency tabled in Parliament earlier this month, and I raised this again at the hearing today. The Commission believes that if adopted, the proposed legislation would constitute a serious breach of EU principles and EU law. And last week, together with the Executive Vice President Hennifer Cunnin, I wrote to the Hungarian government asking that the draft law be withdrawn from the legislative process.